Hi everyone and welcome along. Today we're going to do a lovely bonfire scene, really playing around with the use of light and dark with watercolour because a lot of people find it very challenging to create that real contrast in a landscape scene. So grab your paints and let's get started. We're going to begin this piece by masking it down because we're going to be using lots of water. So I just got masking tape. This is just some I had lying around, and yeah, so we've put all four sides down and I've just smoothed it down, making sure there are no little air bubbles. And we need a large brush to do a big wash over the page. But we're going to start with possibly the most important thing with this piece, so I want you to pay attention. What we're going to do is we're going to focus on a central area where our bonfire is going to be, and I'm going to draw a circle of water, and so we have unpainted space. Now I've got a large, it's not quite a mop brush, but essentially that's what you want here, and what I'm doing now is I am fanning out from the page. Now we want so basically clear water, but I've got the tiniest hint of an orangey tone to this water, which helps for the sake of teaching on YouTube that you might just about be able to see that unpainted circle in the middle, but also because that tone is what we want just very gently around the centre there, because that is going to be our sort of white hot glowing light. Now I'm going to take some Paynes Grey. My Paynes Grey seems to be quite blue, which is kind of perfect for what I want, and I'm now going to fill in the sides with some nice dark colour, because what we want is a sense of this fire, this bonfire cutting through into a dark night. So I'm just painting in the colour, and obviously the colour is going to be fading off my brush, but now I'm actually going to blot it off and try and get rid of most of the colour. And I'm just going to draw in what we've got. Now at this point it looks like we've got some quite clear stripes of colour forming, but don't worry, it all starts to blend rather nicely. And in fact, what you really need to be careful of is not to overwork this, because if you do too many brush strokes, just trying to prod it and poke it here and there, then you will end up with funny stripes. So we've got a really nice sort of central glowing point, which is fantastic, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add even more depth and darkness to the outside edges. So I've got some Mars black here, and I'm just going to feed that into my Paynes Grey. I want an even darker, even more concentrated colour, and I just want to sort of start placing that in at the corners whilst this is still wet. Get your most concentrated colour right in the corners there. It is tricky at this stage when you're painting something with sort of wanting to add lots of darkness to it, because you can find almost if you add too much colour to a wet page, you can start to feel yourself almost like bringing it off the page. So if you start to see too many sort of white little almost sort of places where you've removed the colour, just sort of pause for a minute, load up your brush with a bit more colour, and just gently dab it in. Now, so yes, as I said, our bonfire is going to be there. We're now going to just get a little bit of burnt sienna on the page, because I want to start now building in a bit of a scene. So just coming from the sides and from beneath, but then still bringing in a bit of that Paynes Grey we want to always make sure that our edges to this piece are nice and dark. I've sort of got them coming like slightly curved down. So that's really nice. Okay, so we just need to let this dry for a few more minutes. So it's not 100% bone dry, but it is going to be quite a lot drier than this. So we can place in some distant trees first, and then we can really get to going on our bonfire in the middle. Okay, so our page has dried a little bit. Now here's a handy little tip. You can very carefully just wipe some of the paint off your masking tape, because it will tend to stay wet on there for a lot longer, and you could run the risk of just smudging your hand on it and maybe getting it on the painting. So I'm just doing it on those two sides there, which is where my hand comes in from the side. Now this is still definitely damp, but it's perfect for what I need to do now. So keeping in mind, we need to have the sense of this amazing glow, this blinding glow that we can't see much from. But I want to get in some trees in behind. So what we're going to do is we're just going to paint the trees to the point where they start to get sort of blocked out by the brilliant glow of the bonfire. And also, obviously, the page is still wet, so we're not actually going to see much definition of the tree anyway. And that's kind of perfect too, because we're building up the impression of being in the forest. So let me show you. With a size 0 brush, I am painting a vertical line, and then I am painting outwards these little S curves and C curves. I'm coming down into that glow a little bit, and I'm just using the Paynes Grey that's left over. And just trying to do this with as few brush strokes as possible to create my pine trees. And then just letting that colour just fade. Taking the paint off my brush a little bit if you feel like you've got too much. And this is just building up the story of this bonfire. Essentially, we're just building up the background. As we go along, the page is obviously getting drier, but I still need to be careful not to try to not to touch the page with your hand. So I'm doing a very sort of vertical painting style at the moment. These ones at the side, I can use a little bit more colour, a little bit more concentrated paint, because it is getting, you know, darker towards the edges of the circle. But what is important is don't start sort of sloshing lots of water on your trees here, because if you start putting a lot of water onto the page whilst this background is still damp, is again you run the risk of removing the paint from the background. So I'm just about on the right side of not too much water, and also my trees are just getting a little bit sort of fuller. They're coming down a bit further down, because obviously the reach of the glow of the bonfire is fading as we get towards the edge. So really pleased with that. So you can get this sense all the time that we're building this kind of optical illusion that we've got this amazing glowing bonfire in the middle. So now we can actually start to put this bonfire in itself. So we need some burnt sienna in here, for we're going to have a sort of glowing colours, so we need also some reds and oranges. So get your cadmium orange woken up, cadmium yellow, that's already woken up, and also a bit of red. We're definitely going to get that in there. But also remember that we have done most of the work by creating this amazing glow, so don't worry too much about sort of, I don't know, doing too much work, I think, with the fire. So I'm going to start with some very dilute cadmium yellow because we want to build this up slowly. And I'm going to sort of find that central unpainted glow spot. And I'm using sort of my brush angled quite low to the page. I just want to make sure it's really, really, really clean. In fact, this is a good time to get fresh water, isn't it? So there's no chance of any blue on there. And yeah, I want to use the side of my brush and also just get rid of that hair. God, this is going well, isn't it? And yeah, just sort of peter out what colour you've got. And we're just going to start building the glow of this fire. So I'm being really cautious with the amount of actual colour I use because the real power of this is the white gold, I suppose. Okay, so that's a good start, and now I'm going to bring in the tiniest bit of orange sort of on the peripheries, because remember the central heat is the whitest hot spot. Oh, a little bit of red, not too much. And now I'm going to start thinking about the logs, but there's still, this page is probably going to be a tiny bit damp, so remember we're still just being quite loose. So I'm placing in just light burnt sienna logs with plenty of unpainted space. They're more just sort of loose brush strokes at the moment, and I'm actually quite enjoying using the texture of the page to give me a little bit of texture on the logs themselves. I might have one just sticking out at wrong. There we go. So it's not all going to be sort of perfectly placed in there. And this is great because I mean in the UK we have a holiday called Bonfire Night or Guy Fawkes Night on November the 5th, and we have fireworks. So this is rather nice to celebrate that. Now, quite rapidly I want to get some really dark colour in underneath those logs. So I've got some of the same colour that we painted the sort of peripheries of the outsides of the edge. So now just painting in some shadows in sort of underneath the fire, because it's that funny thing that sort of right directly underneath the fire is where you see an awful lot of shadow and darkness. But even now my page is still clinging on to the last little bits of moisture, so we're still working quite loose. I might put a few little sort of twiggy gnarly branch bits on my bits of wood, because this is a sort of wild campfire. And now I'm going to add just a little bit more yellow to the base. So I'm just, it's a real sort of tentative process creating something like this, because it is such a delicate thing, because we've been working with unpainted space, creating that glow. We haven't wanted to overpaint. But now I'm just with a, oh yeah, so that's looking quite nice sort of around the edges now. It's drying up. What we're going to do now is actually paint in some trees that are far closer in to this campfire, and we are going to use them to really show how the glow of this fire is spreading out. So I'm going to paint in using yellow. I'm going to paint in a tree trunk. And that seems a bit strange to paint in a yellow tree trunk, but bear with me. Now I'm going to add the brown. Getting taller and taller, and as the strength of the fire obviously lessens, the more we move away from it, suddenly the shadow takes hold and our trees are dark once more. But also the shadowy side of the tree is also dark once more. Until it gets right to the top and it is really, really dark. Okay, so I need to now even out that tree trunk, so it needs to be a little bit broader on this side, so I can just use my yellow paint there. And of course it is a fir tree, so eventually we're going to be seeing some of the pine branches and needles coming off. So on the shadowy side that's quite simple. We don't have to be too detailed with it. I still think we can make our trunk a bit broader at the base. It's funny, isn't it, when you, there we go. And now for the undersides of branches here, it's only going to be a little bit catching the yellow, but what we do is we start with the yellow because that's our lightest colour first. And cadmium yellow is absolutely amazing for standing out on darker backgrounds, so how good is that? If you don't have cadmium yellow in your palette, I highly recommend getting it because I use it a lot. It's the yellow I use the most. Okay, so we're going to get it to that point. I'm going to pop in maybe another tree there and one there, and then we will put in our detail. So we've got a nice composition now, and what I love is that we haven't had to use any gouache, any thickener. The strength of Cadmium Yellow over actually what has become a rather faint watercolour background, although it's just got the real atmosphere from having really dark edges. It just means that we've really sort of nailed using watercolour and creating a real optical illusion. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to be adding the dark low lights, but to the sort of top edge of these bits here. So I can just be careful, trying to sort of convey the sense of pine leaves, but we're still trying to be sort of fairly loose. I can put in a few extra sort of dark accents, so we're just taking from the top half. Your cadmium yellow will have been put on really quite thick, so it'll take its time to dry. There we go, we're just going to keep on adding little dashes like that, and you start to see how it really looks like the light has come up from underneath. And that's really, really looking wonderful. It's really starting to glow, and then we can just sort of reciprocate with just a little bit more yellow detail on the fire itself, because you just don't want to overdo it at the beginning. But once you've sort of established the glow that the fire is giving out, then you can just finish it off like that, and a few little sort of sparks coming off the fire, and a few slightly more defined details on some of this wood. So the things to take away from this is really, it's all about right at the beginning establishing that glow from the very start, and then just sort of very slowly coming back in from the edges, and all of a sudden you've got a beautiful bonfire right in front of your eyes. And the ground we can see little sort of a slight sense of where the ground lies, but we don't need to worry too much. What we do have though is making sure we've got shadow coming off from behind, so just extending out that dark Paynes Grey colour. And now let's peel the tape off, because that's the most exciting bit. Well, it's the most satisfying bit. But I really hope you've enjoyed that. I absolutely loved painting that, and it's a lovely seasonal one to get all cosy. Now the nights are drawing in. Thanks so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed that and picked up some tips along the way. I want to say a huge thank you to my patrons for their support, because that support enables us to keep creating these videos that everyone can enjoy. And if you enjoyed it, then hit the like button and comment below. And now I've got to tell you that today, the 4th of November, is the last day for any international customers, that's outside of the UK, to get their hands on a hard copy of our watercolour advent calendar, which we're going to be painting throughout December. So head to the episode notes for the details to get your order in, and after then you can always get your hands on the digital download. UK customers, you've got a bit more time. So until next time, bye!